Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Hong Kong Horror. Simon here. How are we all doing tonight? For this episode, we're going to take a little trip over to the Philippines to cover a deeply unsettling incident that happened to our main character. Let's call him Jacob. Afterwards, as always, I'm going to break everything down from a traditional Chinese cultural perspective to see if we can figure out exactly what happened here. So, without further ado, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and let's dive right into it. This all began years ago when Jacob was fresh out of college. He was lucky enough to land a job in Manila, but before long, a massive wave of layoffs swept through his company. Jacob, he was caught up in this wave. He was devastated. This was his first adult job out of school, and despite trying his best, he didn't survive the cuts. Having only been there for a year, his savings were practically non-existent. Without income, continuing to live in the city would be impossible. He had no choice but to pack up his things and move back in with his parents, who lived in a remote rural village deep in the countryside. To be honest, Jacob dreaded going back. He always dreamed of living in the city. He loved the independence, the energy, and the convenience of everything. But with this new reality of being unemployed now, all of these comforts had to be put on hold until he could find a new job. Growing up, Jacob never really believed in the supernatural, but the bizarre series of events waiting for him in that isolated province would soon force him to question everything he's ever believed in. Back under his parents' roof, Jacob had to adjust to a completely different style of life again. He felt like he was back in high school again. Back when he still had his job, he was working all the time. Even though everything was super convenient at his apartment, in reality, he was working so much that he didn't really get to enjoy any of the comforts he had available to him anyways. Now that he was unemployed, he had all the time in the world, but absolutely nothing to do. Most of his days now were spent sending out job applications into the void, only to be ghosted by recruiters. Back in Manila, his apartment building had a gym, and that routine was the thing he missed the most. No matter how late he worked in the office, he always looked forward to hitting the gym afterwards to unwind and de-stress. Trying to make the best of his situation now, he decided to take up jogging at night. It wasn't the high-end fitness center he was used to, but it would have to do. It was better than nothing. To his surprise, this soon became the best part of his day. The night air was nice and cool, the village was quiet, and he began to appreciate the stillness and the beauty of the countryside. He never realized how beautiful his village was when he was younger, but now that he was an adult, he really started to see how gorgeous and natural it really was. There was one other thing that made his new nighttime routine special. Every evening, around the time Jacob finished his run, a local vendor would drive through the village. She rode a custom tricycle, heavily modified, with a large basket and long metal poles jutting out. Hanging from hooks on these poles were plastic bags filled to the brim with fresh vegetables, meat, and local snacks. Jacob was fascinated by this mobile market. Every single night after his workout, he would stop by to buy a few sticks of grilled chicken skewers or other little treats. Before long, it became like a clockwork routine. Jacob would head out for his run around 7 p.m. or so, and make his way back by 9 p.m. The food tricycle would always be parked right at the entrance of the village, waiting for the last customers for the night. Over the weeks, Jacob struck up a genuine bond with the woman behind the cart. He called her Tita Rosa. She was in her 60s, incredibly kind, and had a sharp sense of humor. As they talked more and more, she began to treat Jacob almost like her own son. But being unemployed meant that money was tight, and Jacob couldn't always afford a nightly snack. On nights, when his pockets were empty, he would still walk over to the tricycle just to chat with Tita Rosa. He would politely tell her that he wasn't hungry, but Tita Rosa knew his situation. She had too much grace to ever make him feel embarrassed. Instead, on those empty pocket nights, she would insist on handing him a skewer for free. To save his pride, she would make up an excuse, telling him, "You have to take it, Jacob. If I don't sell them tonight, they'll just go bad, and I'll have to throw them away. Time flew by, and Jacob gradually settled into the slower pace of village life. It was peaceful. Even though his pockets were empty, the lack of corporate stress was a welcome trade-off. Still, he desperately needed an income, but his luck with the job hunt just wasn't turning around. One night, after finishing his usual route, he spotted Tita Rosa parked at the village entrance, as she normally does. He actually had a bit of loose change on him that night, just enough for a rice cake, so he walked over to buy it and to catch up with Tita Rosa. As they were chatting, Tita Rosa suddenly looked at him and asked, "Jacob, do you have a girlfriend yet? Because my daughter's single. She's a nice, beautiful girl. You should meet her." Jacob laughed, waving his hand. Whoa, Tita. I'm broke right now. Your daughter? She wouldn't want anything to do with a poor man like me." He thought she was just teasing, but as she kept pressing the issue, he realized she was dead serious. To politely move past it, Jacob smiled and said, "Alright, Tita, one day, I promise." As time went on, Tita Rosa stopped showing up every evening like she normally did. Her schedule became erratic. She would come on random nights, but then not show up again for days at a time. On nights that she did come to work, Jacob would ask her where she's been, but she would dodge the question, murmuring something that she's just been busy at home, before changing the subject. Then, the tricycle stopped coming altogether. A week passed, then 2, then an entire month. Jacob asked a few neighbors if they have seen Tita Rosa, but no one seemed to know where she went. Jacob couldn't help but feel that something was seriously wrong. Then, one evening, Jacob heard it from the distance. That familiar, sputtering tricycle engine echoing down the road. Feeling a wave of relief, he rushed down to the entrance of the village. Sure enough, the modified tricycle was slowly rolling up, just like old times. Jacob eagerly waved her down, genuinely excited to catch up with his old friend. But as the vehicle stopped in its usual spot under the dim streetlights, the relief vanished. A sudden wave of goosebumps broke out across Jacob's skin. Tita Rosa's face was horribly gaunt. Her cheeks were visibly sunken in, as if she had lost a lot of weight in a matter of weeks. Her skin was a sickly, unnatural pale, and her eyes looked hollow. Trying to hide his shock, Jacob leaned in. "Hey, Tita, what's wrong? Are you feeling okay?" She looked at him. "Hey, Jacob, I'm fine," she replied, her voice flat. "It's okay, really. I'll be better soon." Despite her sickly appearance, she was smiling and seemed to be in a good mood. Not wanting to pry anymore into something personal, Jacob decided to drop it and change the subject. But as he began picking out his food, he noticed something different tonight with Tita Rosa. She was completely quiet tonight. He was not used to this because Tita Rosa had always been a loud, lively woman who was always joking around. "Tita, are you sure you're doing okay?" Jacob asked, genuinely concerned. "Is there anything that I could help you with?" Tita Rosa stared at him, motionless for a long few seconds before she finally spoke. "Well, Jacob, since you're asking, if you wouldn't mind, could you come to my house tomorrow night to help me with something?" Jacob nodded without hesitation. "Of course, Tita. I might be broke, but if there's something that I could help you with, just let me know." Her face seemed to light up at his words. She gave him her exact address, her voice dropping to a low murmur. "Thank you, Jacob. Please, come over to my house tomorrow night at exactly 10 p.m. I'll leave the front gate unlocked for you. Once you enter, walk around to the side of the house, find the window. Directly underneath it, count to the 3rd brick. If you pull on it hard, that brick will come loose. Inside, there's an envelope. Please, take it and give it to my daughter. She'll be inside the house." Jacob's mind raced with confusion. Why the secrecy? Why did he have to sneak around the side of the house and pull a loose brick from the wall? Why couldn't Tita Rosa just hand the envelope to her own daughter herself? Before he could voice his doubts, she cut him off, as if reading his mind. I know, Jacob. It's a weird request, but please, I cannot do this myself. I'm begging you to do this for me. None of it made any sense, but Jacob trusted Tita Rosa. She had always been so nice to him, and he figured she must have a desperate reason for this bizarre ask. So, he gave her his word. He promised that tomorrow at 10 p.m. he would do exactly as she asked. Relief washed over her face. She immediately began piling food into his hands. Oh no, Tita, no. This is way too much, Jacob protested. I don't have the cash for all of this. Really, it's too much. But Tita Rosa wouldn't hear it. She insisted, pushing the food against his chest, refusing to take a single cent. Before he could argue any further, she abruptly waved him off, telling him to go home because it was getting late. Giving in, Jacob thanked her, clutched the food, and began the quiet walk back to his parents' house. As all of this was playing out, Jacob caught movement out of the corner of his eye. In one of the nearby village houses, an old man was standing by his window, staring intently into the street, watching the entire exchange unfold. When Jacob made eye contact with him, this old man flinched. He quickly ducked out of sight and closed the blinds, acting as if he just saw something that he wasn't meant to see. A chill ran down Jacob's spine. He turned around one last time to look back at the village entrance, but Tita Rosa was already gone. The street was completely empty. It was weird. Her tricycle was really loud, but he didn't hear the engine start, let alone drive away. A heavy feeling settled over him. Something felt wrong tonight, but he couldn't put a finger on what it was exactly. But a promise was a promise. As crazy as the situation felt, Tita Rosa always looked out for him, as she just handed him all this free food. He couldn't bring himself to let her down. The next evening, Jacob set off toward the address that Tita Rosa had written down. The journey took him out of his own village and deep into a neighboring village, requiring multiple bus transfers. Eventually, the public transit routes ended completely, and Jacob had to navigate the rest of his way down a dark, unpaved dirt road on foot. After walking for a while in the darkness, he finally arrived. It was a really old, dilapidated village house. It was in terrible shape, if he was being honest. It was far worse than his parents' place. The plants around the property were completely overgrown, choking the house. The house itself looked like it would collapse under its own weight any moment now. A wave of hesitation hit Jacob. Looking at this dark, decaying house, every instinct told him to turn around and run back to the main road. But as he stood there, staring at this house, a deep wave of guilt washed over him. Tita Rosa was always living in these heartbreaking conditions, yet she had consistently gone out of her way to feed him for free. She possessed such a generous soul. He couldn't let her down now. He noticed that the front gate was already opened, exactly as promised. Jacob slipped through the opening, quietly making his way along the side of the house toward the window. He found the spot and carefully counted the rows. 1, 2, 3, just as she had instructed. When he pulled out the third brick, it slid out smoothly. Reaching into the dark hole, Jacob's fingers brushed against paper. It was a thick, heavy envelope. Jacob clutched it tightly, put the brick back into place, and walked around to the front door. He took a deep breath and knocked gently. A few seconds passed before the door clicked open. A young woman, roughly around his age, stepped into the doorway. The moment Jacob saw her, his breath immediately caught in his throat. He was entirely dumbfounded. She was breathtaking. She had long, dark hair, large, beautiful eyes, and dimples as she smiled politely. But as Jacob looked closer, he noticed that her eyes were heavily swollen and bloodshot, as if she had been crying. Jacob also noticed the cane clutched tightly in her left hand. It seemed that this young woman had some sort of mobility issue. "Hi, may I help you?" she asked softly. Jacob tried to gather his composure. After standing there like an idiot for a few agonizing seconds, he finally managed to find his voice. "Oh, hi. I'm so sorry to disturb you so late at night. I'm not sure if your mom mentioned that I would be stopping by, but she asked me to bring this to you. I know her as Tita Rosa, and she comes to my village almost every night for work." A wave of confusion washed over her face. She slowly took the heavy envelope, peeling it open to see what was inside. It was packed with a massive stack of cash. The moment that her eyes fell upon the money, the girl completely broke down. Her knees gave out, and she collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Panic and confusion surged through Jacob. He quickly knelt down beside her, trying to offer comfort. Through her tears, she managed to piece the story together for him. Her name was Maya, and her mother, Tita Rosa, had passed away over a week ago due to major health complications. Because of Maya's physical limitations, finding work was very difficult. With her mother gone, she wasn't just drowning in grief, but she was under an immense amount of stress, terrified on how she was going to survive on her own. She had absolutely no idea her mother had hidden away an emergency fund. Maya thanked Jacob profusely through her tears, telling him that this money was literally her lifeline. As she spoke, the blood drained from Jacob's face. He was entirely numb. A week ago? How was that possible? He had just spoken with Tita Rosa last night. Looking at Maya, Jacob didn't dare to mention that to her. He was terrified, but in that moment, a sudden realization washed over him. He remembered what Tita Rosa had said to him weeks ago. "My daughter is single. She's a kind, beautiful girl. You should meet her." Jacob couldn't help but think back to this conversation with Tita. She must have really wanted him to meet Maya after all. Jacob sat down on the ground beside Maya, quietly offering a shoulder to lean on as they began to share stories about Tita Rosa. And Jacob even managed to bring a faint smile back on her face. Even though she lived far out, Jacob worried about Maya and didn't want her to be all alone. He made it a point to travel to her house every few days to check on her and keep her company. He was amazed by how well they clicked. Maya was brilliant, funny, and a gentle soul. The more they talked, the more he wanted to be around her. Eventually, they fell head over heels for each other. Jacob started coming around every other day, even though it was far. He helped Maya take care of the heavy household chores. He even tried his best to fix up her house. Before long, they made it official. They were boyfriend and girlfriend. A few months later, Jacob's luck was finally turning around, and he landed a great full-time position back in Manila. No matter how busy he was at this new job, he still went to see Maya every single night. Once he was settled into this new role, he secured an apartment of his own again in the city. But this time, he asked Maya to move in with him so he could look after her and see her every single night without having to travel so far. She happily agreed. The rest, as they say, is history. They're happily married still, with 2 beautiful children. So, Hong Kong horror family, what do you think really happened here? Was it a mother's lingering spirit that wanted to do one last thing for her daughter before she moved on to the next state of existence? Or something else entirely? Please, pause the video here and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. So, what do I think happened here from a Chinese cultural perspective? This story is a deep one, but not uncommon in my culture. Tita Rosa is something we call Yamwan Basan, which translates to a yin soul that has not dispersed. After death, not every spirit immediately moves on. There are many different reasons which may cause them to stay behind as long as they're able to. It could be due to many different reasons. Most of the time, it comes down to unresolved duties, concern for loved ones, or emotional attachment. It's important to note that Even though I cover a lot of these stories where the spirits are usually malicious, please keep in mind that not all lingering spirits are this way. Some are protective, as I believe is the case with Tita Rosa. She feels much closer, what we would describe as a Xinling, a benevolent spirit. There's a few important signs which leads me to believe this. If you watch Tita Rosa's behavior throughout the story, she never harms Jacob. She never deceives him for selfish reasons, never drains his vitality, doesn't lure him away to somewhere dangerous, or cause him any illness or misfortune. Everything she did was to protect her daughter. She just wanted her to be safe. With her gone, her final wish was for Jacob to help deliver that envelope of cash to Maya, which was her lifeline. This is called Wai Yun, which means final wish. This concept is massive in Chinese ghost beliefs. A person who dies with a strong, unresolved wish actually isn't able to fully transition onward, because this emotional burden attaches them to the human world still. She most likely didn't have enough time to tell Maya about this envelope while she was still alive. She understands the reality that Maya is vulnerable and not able to fully support herself. Her survival depended on that emergency fund. Tita Rosa always believed that Jacob was a trustworthy and good-natured individual. I think that her spirit may have remained specifically to complete her duty as a mom, as a protector, where she wanted to introduce the two of them. Parental obligation does not necessarily end immediately after death, especially for mothers. There's a very old East Asian spiritual idea that intense maternal attachment can temporarily overpower even the natural transition into the afterlife. Also, there was one detail in the story that leads me to believe that Tita Rosa is a conscious spirit and not just a looping spirit or residual haunting. Do you remember what she says when Jacob asked her if she was okay? She said, "I'll be better soon." I think she understands that she's dead and that she has to move on soon. This line is deep because to Jacob, he thinks she means that she'll recover soon from her health ailments. But in reality, I think what she really means is that once all of this is done, she can finally leave in peace. So, some of you might be thinking, how come Jacob was able to see Tita Rosa's spirit? Does he have Yamyongan, the third eye? No, I don't think that Jacob has the third eye, since this wasn't mentioned anywhere in the story. I think he was able to see her and interact with her because of their relationship. This is something we call 人情债, which means a debt of human feeling. Repeated acts of kindness creates invisible obligations between people. Jacob and Tita Rosa were both extremely kind to each other in life. Tita Rosa always fed him, many times, even for free, even though her own financial situation wasn't the best. She cared about his dignity and treated him as her own son. Jacob always took the time to listen to her. He valued her presence and promised to help her. Over time, their relationship creates a deep, interpersonal bond. In folk beliefs, strong emotional bonds can transcend death temporarily. Jacob had become connected to her household fate, making him reachable. Something else I wanted to briefly touch on here is the fate element, Mingwan, which means destiny. I think fate and destiny are involved here as well, on top of everything we discussed. If you think about it, Jacob's whole negative situation of being laid off may seem extremely sad and stressful at the time. But if you look at the bigger picture, was it really? Maybe not. I think that he had to go through it. If he never lost his job, he would have never returned home to the village. He would have never met Tita Rosa, and would have never met his future wife, Maya. I think that his unemployment has spiritually repositioned him exactly where he needed to be in life at the time. So the next time something bad happens in your life, hang in there, keep going, things will get better eventually. Maybe it's just destiny redirecting your life for you to get to a better point in your life. Maybe it's karmic realignment. Thank you, Hong Kong Horror family, for making it all the way to the end of this episode. I hope you all enjoyed tonight's story. Until we speak again next week, stay safe and good night.